I'm turning around. So we will do a quick overview. Thank you to Carlos for coming. He's going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm telling you. I know he will. He's always got great questions.
I told us someone would come.
That's right. Sorry, do you want to press even more?
Oh, you got this.
I know we're left. There you go. To be on that camera. Okay. So we're really here tonight just to the council has been working for the last several months to put together a recommended budget. It's really an important management and planning tool for the city, and it's really the chance where we have to put our money where our mouth is every year. So we have a few steps left in the process, this being one of them. Council will consider this, and then they will look at kind of a final recommended budget, and we will have our formal legally required public hearing on August 3rd, and then they will be advancing a budget for adoption at the August 17th meeting. So every year when we start out our budget process, we usually start in the first quarter of the year looking at threats and opportunities. The state requires us to submit a budget to the county by August 25th of each year. And so we have to be very conservative in our approach in both projecting revenues and expenses. We have the opportunity to amend our budget prior to it taking effect, but we really like to try to take care and address those issues as best we can when we put the budget together. So we started with some 5-year financial forecasting and then looking at where we've been over the last several years early in the budget process. Then we asked the departments to submit their requests for the current year. We build our general fund operating budget from there, and then we move on to the capital infrastructure side, which includes streets, stormwater, parks and recreation. Each year we really try to look at, identify, and account for any potential threats and opportunities that may impact the budget, and those can come from the economy, they can come from legislative action, they can come from our elected officials, they can come from staff. This year, some of the things that we discussed in connection with the 2017 budget, we always talk about sort of balancing service delivery needs with our infrastructure investment, appropriately funding facility and equipment, implementing more aggressive cost recovery goals for the community center, leveraging redevelopment opportunities that we might have throughout the city, and this year particularly managing legislative impacts with the coming of a property tax lid imposed by the state legislature that will become effective in January of 2017, which at this point city councils have had the authority to set the mill levies in their communities without a vote of the public. And this will require, in most circumstances, if there's an increase in the mill levy, that will require a vote of the public to raise that. So we're going to have to work through the timing and the process of elections and doing planning probably 2 years in advance for that. But that is coming in 2017. So our budget covers the fiscal year, matches up with the calendar year. We have an entire total budget for 2017 that's $20.7 million, all funds. It's about a dozen funds that we manage and present in that budget. Most of our discussions centered around the general fund, which is our operating budget fund that focuses on core municipal services, police, public works, parks and recreation, administration. When we look at revenues for 2017 in the general fund budget, we're estimating revenue of about $11.5 million. That's an increase over the 2016 budget of just slightly more than 5%. We've seen continued growth in our assessed value, and so we're seeing some increases both in sales taxes and in property taxes that are coming into the city. So that's good. That's signs of a healthy, growing community. So we're excited to see that. But as you can see from this chart, really there are 4 primary revenue streams that flow into the general fund, and they make up about between 80 and 85% of those total revenues. Sales and use tax, which are incredibly dependent on the economy, make up the largest share of that at 34%. Property tax then comes in at 23%, parks and recreation at 18%, and fines and fees, which are municipal court primarily traffic citations, make up about 11%. Franchise fees, which is the 5% that's charged on your electric bill, your gas bill, your water bill, makes up about 9% of that budget. So revenue is strong. We don't have any one particular revenue stream that's growing fast enough to keep up with inflation in most cases, so we continue to sort of have to balance revenues and expenses as we go through the budget process each year. The 2017 recommended budget includes holding the mill levy constant for 2017, and that would be a total mills levied of 18.225. Last year, the council converted the transportation utility fee to mills, which is the equivalent of about 7 mills. The budget this year recommends maintaining that slightly more than 11 mills to support general fund operations, with the revenue from the 7 mills being dedicated 100% to street maintenance. Every year when we look at, if you can go to the expenditure slide, then we've looked at and used a variety of tools to keep our budget in balance. That can be eliminating budgeted positions, implementing hiring freezes or salary freezes, delaying the purchase of capital equipment, eliminating non-essential budget items, privatizing outsourcing services, a number of things. And we've used any and all of those tools over the years as we put our budgets together and managed our budgets. The 2017 recommended general fund expenditures are $11.9 million. You will note that expenses do exceed revenues, and so we'll come back and touch on that. Not typically a practice that we bring forward a budget that includes that, but there are some very specific reasons this year. Obviously not sustainable in the long term. So when you look at how our budget is broken down by department grouping, you can see public safety comprises the largest share of the general fund operating budget at about 36%, followed by public works and parks and recreation at 26 and 23%, respectively. So the 2017 recommended general fund expenditures have increased about 8%, slightly more than 8% from 2016 when you include your transfers. And there's a transfer out of the revenues from that 7 mills for streets and a transfer out to subsidize a portion of the residential trash collection contract. Largest expense in any of our operating departments is personnel. Overall personnel expenses comprise about 60% of our total general fund operating budget. It takes people to deliver the services that we do. It's not uncommon for what you see in other municipal organizations. And then, excuse me, contractuals and commodities make up the next largest share of the general fund budget, and those are the goods and services that we purchase to deliver the services. Then capital and debt service actually saw an increase in that for the 2017 budget. For the last several years, we've deferred some equipment and facility investments because of budgetary situations, and we are trying to get some of those back on track. Touched on the transfers briefly, about $925,000 coming out of the general fund being transferred for street maintenance, and then $85,000 for that trash contract. There's a one-page handout, so I won't go over everything in detail. There's a one-page handout that I think you picked up that really tries to summarize the overall policy assumptions and program objectives that are included in the 2017 budget, talking about the mill rates, fees and taxes, our fund balance policies, and then highlighting some of the expenditures. We're really working to try to expand some policies and programs in the general fund, including an increase in our business improvement grant program, an increase for the tree board to address tree maintenance throughout our parks, increasing a park maintenance budget in response to the Parks Master Plan that we created in 2015, and then touching on, again, funding the highest priority capital and expenditures, including IT expenses. Any questions from general office? I'm going to do this very casually. I can look at questions from that standpoint. As we talked about, in order to, it's always a balancing act with council goals and objectives, putting a budget together every year. One of the things that has been at the top of the list for the last several years was rebuilding general fund balance. The council has a policy goal of trying to have a 25% of operating revenues in the general fund as a fund balance, that rainy day fund, if you will. We had a specific drawdown of that fund back in 2010 when we restructured some stormwater debt, and we've been consciously working to rebuild that. Over the last 2 years, we've added more than $1 million through savings, through vacant positions, through budget cuts, through deferral of equipment, maintenance purchases, and some of those items. We've been able to add a little over $1 million to that. So we actually finished 2015 slightly ahead of that 25% fund balance. And so the budget for 2017 recommends spending some of that down in the short term. We continue, and because we budget so conservatively, we tend to add fund balance each year. But we'd like to be able to catch up, and we think we can do that and still maintain an adequate amount of reserves for 2017. Obviously, our goal is to get back to the point where we're bringing a budget that is balanced, revenues equaling or exceeding expenditures in that particular year. So we would actually be reducing the general fund balance from 26% down to 21%. Still leaves us with about 3 months of operating expenses in reserves, which is a kind of a benchmark and best practice in municipal government. And we think we will do better than that. Part of what we're doing, though, with about $250,000 of that is creating a facility and equipment reserve fund for the future, so we can help level out the peaks and valleys that we're experiencing. So that money is not specifically committed, so in effect, if we hit a situation we would need that, it would be available to the council and to the city. So general fund, again, comprises about half of the total budget that we adopt each year. The rest of, and that general fund picture has been improving, I'd say, the last 2 or 3 years. So then we look at why that's been improving. One of the biggest reasons that the general fund has had some relief is that the city has made some very specific efforts over the last 10 years or so to create and implement dedicated revenue streams to deal with infrastructure issues, particularly street and stormwater. Through our stormwater utility fee, the transportation utility fee, which we're not using any longer, but dedicated mills for street maintenance, street sales tax, and a parks and recreation sales tax. So we budget those in funds outside of the general fund because they are dedicated special purpose funds, and we need to be able to track and account for those, make them very transparent in how they're used. But this gives kind of just a snapshot from 2010 through, projected out through 2021. You can kind of see all of those lines trending upward. The blue is stormwater revenues, street revenues in black, and parks and recreation revenues in green. The big jump in parks and recreation you can see was in 2013 we adopted or voters approved the 3/8 cent parks and recreation sales tax, and so that brought that revenue stream very significantly. So we look at using a multi-year CIP or community investment program to build kind of a 5-year plan for our capital infrastructure projects. Those are really focused around 3 primary program areas: streets, stormwater, parks and recreation. The slide presentation doesn't really address that, but in a packet that's available online, there's certainly the 5-year projection for what those include. On the stormwater side, again, we've built very conservative budgets. There are a lot of unknowns that we were relevant when we put the 2016 budget together. They still apply today, and that is, in particular, we don't have a decision yet on the transportation utility fee, particularly if there's going to be a required repayment of that. That would obviously have a significant budgetary impact, so we want to be very careful in how we commit resources on the street side until we have an answer to that question. We expect to hear in the next couple of months when the Supreme Court will hear that case, but obviously not in time to make a decision in the 2017 budget. We would also, the county has elected to put a 1/4 cent sales tax to upgrade or replace, rebuild the courthouse on the ballot in November. Counties and cities receive a portion of county sales tax, so if the county sales tax passes, we expect to receive about $230,000 a year. It doesn't have to be dedicated for any specific purpose when it comes to us. So if that passes, that will be a boost. Those revenues were not included in our 2017 budget. So there are a lot of things, and again, on the stormwater side, we're primarily using the stormwater utility fee to pay debt service on our existing stormwater bonds. That depends on our ability to take on new projects. On the stormwater side, depends very heavily on repayment of the special assessment by the Gateway developer, which is about $600,000 a year. So we took a very conservative approach in putting this budget together and assumed we might not have that for several years, and wanted to then look at, what happens. We can always adjust. The council can make amendments to the budget unless things change either in the course of this year or as we move into 2018 and looking at that budget. With that, we'll be happy. Those are probably the highlights. Again, there are a few other minor funds that we budget. Special alcohol fund, which comes a third of the liquor by the drink taxes that the city receives. Solid waste utility fund, which is for our trash contract. The Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau fund, which supports the Mission magazine and some of our special events. And then if you looked at a total fund budget, you would see some TIF and CID funds for some of the development projects where we have those incentives in place and are currently tracking and managing for those. So the recommended budget, as I've said, includes no fee or tax increases, tries to expand city programs and services that support both our residents and our businesses, includes over $1.7 million for the maintenance and reconstruction of city streets, and over $400,000 annually to maintain our parks and recreation facilities. The park sales tax actually generates closer to $825,000, but a portion of that right now is being dedicated to debt service on the outdoor pool. So about half of what the sales tax generates covers that debt service, and the other half is available then to make improvements to our outdoor parks or support things at the community center. So as I said, council will look at kind of the final budget, hold the public hearing at their Finance and Administration Committee meeting on August 3rd at 6:30. So I would invite you, any and all of you, to come back, and I'd be happy to, I'm sure the council would answer any questions.
I got a question. Is this transportation utility fee thing, that could be the worst thing that would happen this year as far as if they went negative versus positive?
And my understanding is that yes. I mean, so the decision, even if the Supreme Court were to determine, uphold the decision of the appellate court, which was that was illegal, then we would still have to go back to district court to answer the question of repayment. So we are probably still 2 years out from a final decision about whether
So that isn't going to hit the budget this year no matter what?
Right, it won't. It
I
won't
mean, that's
hit.
I didn't see anything in here, any gotchas besides that you brought up. I mean, you could have a huge snowfall or something like that, but other than that, that was the only major issue we got to deal with this year.
Yes, absolutely, which was better than last year. We had several kind of gotchas last year that the council made some very difficult decisions.
So if the thing out east doesn't happen this year, that's okay too?
It is okay.
Okay.
Yes. And it's good for the next forever. The stormwater utility fee rate was established in order to be able to manage the existing debt service payments. So we would be good through the life of the existing debt issues that we have without any additional revenue.
Can I ask a question?
Dare I say no?
No, I wasn't sure if that was appropriate. But you mentioned the quarter-cent county sales tax that will be on the ballot in November. And you said it'll probably generate $230,000 for the city of Mission,
Yes.
which I'm thinking that's about a half of what they're going to be collecting, roughly, almost a half. So is that by statute, I'm assuming that has to be done, or how did we end up getting that?
How do we get a portion of the
Yeah, how
county
do we
sales tax?
afford some of that money?
There's a very convoluted formula that distributes county sales tax back to cities based on population and or their mill levy rate.
And they have to do that.
And
by
they have to do
statute.
that by statute.
Okay,
Yes.
so I was just curious if things weren't working out for the county on getting in enough money for their jail, they would be giving us a smaller slice of that, or?
Well, if there's a downturn in the economy overall and sales tax revenues decrease, then yes.
Then ours would go
Then
down.
ours would go down proportionally, but so would our quarter-cent street, our 3.8-cent parks, and our 1% general cent. So you'd see that really across the board. But yes, our share of that. We're not guaranteed $230,000. That's their estimate based on collections in 2017.
Right. Very good. Oh, I did have one other question. You mentioned we were going to take $250,000 out of the general fund, set it in a an account earmarked for building and maintenance,
Building and equipment replacement.
building and equipment replacement. So that money will be earmarked for that, but it's not committed to that. We can still use it if we need to do for whatever. Council lunches or whatever. No.
What I would, typically what we would do is we would restrict it from that perspective, just because I think from a transparency and accountability standpoint, but you have the ability to take specific action as a council and to remove those restrictions.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one. I know there was some discussion at the last meeting, the Finance and Administration meeting, about the $85,000 trash subsidy that's in place and possibly having that go away. It amounts to less than $2 a month per household, and it's a pretty big line item in the city's budget. Was there any change in thought on that one, or I noticed it's called out that it would still, the subsidy would still be in place in 2017?
Well, I mean, that depends on the council and what they want. I mean, there are two different thoughts on that. You know, this year there's no mill increase, and next year we won't be able to have a mill increase without, you know, a vote. And usually it passes because it's for streets or something. So, you know, we save that for an ace in the hole for later, or take it off, whatever the council would.
Yeah, that's totally the council's, the staff left it in, because that has been direction from the council previously, so that's a final policy decision that we look to today.
Any more questions from the council or audience? Thank you, Laura. We will start our council meeting in about 9 minutes. What's that? Yeah, I already read it.